A workplace is unsustainable if working practices lead to worker fatalities and injuries. With the global cost of work-related injuries and deaths standing at almost £3 trillion, it is more important than ever to look after people in the workplace. Socially sustainable business practices are being driven by governments through the supply and value chain, with pressure to ensure businesses look after their people. So how can progressive OSH management lead to improved morale, productivity and loyalty, as well as a healthy return on investment for a socially sustainable future? Today, in a world where businesses are increasingly judged not just by their profits, but by their impact on people and the planet, social sustainability has never been more important. With that, the following introduces Stuart Hughes, President of the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health, and Dr. Christopher Davis, Thought Leadership Manager at IOSH, who discuss the impact of social sustainability and the ongoing work being done to strive towards a safe and healthy world of work.
I'm Stuart Hughes, President of the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health, where we strive for a safe and healthy world of work. Sustainability and corporate social responsibility have long been on the business agenda, but environmental and social activities have not firmly integrated the safety and health of the workforce. We believe sustainability encompasses the protection of workers' health, safety, and welfare. This constitutes a value that has proven to motivate workforces, enhance business reputation, and reduce business risk. The social dimension of sustainability is supremely important in the sense that it will be the investment, engagement, and behaviour of people that unlocks better work, more empowered workers, and more sustainable societies. The value of good OSH is therefore fundamental here. So to join me in this conversation and to have further discussions is Dr. Christopher Davis, Thought Leadership Manager at IOSH. Chris, we know that there's an urgent need for action in this space, both the longer term vision of a socially sustainable future where workers' safety and health is recognised, but also in the short term for OSH professionals, evolving roles and spanning challenges like adapting to new technologies, managing mental health and emergency planning, and so on and so on. We've also witnessed the immediate kind of post-COVID moment, which elevated the importance of OSH, and sustainability gave it an overarching narrative. So I wonder whether you still think that's the case.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. I absolutely think it is part of the case, and I think that framing narrative that sustainability offers is hugely powerful. You're right to point out that immediate post-COVID moment, because it's that sort of disruption and challenge that it gave rise to made the potential contribution of OSH really clear. So it raised the profile of the profession and gave OSH professionals a platform and an opportunity. But I don't think it is a never-ending opportunity, and it does need seizing. One thing that I would add is that moment post-COVID, and actually in the years since, has given rise to a real candid reflection at the professional level to really think about what OSH professionals do, what they could do, what they can't currently do, and if not, why. So whether or not that opportunity has been seized, I do think that it's led to some real opportunities for the profession.
And I think the framing around social sustainability really helps because it gives this broader narrative arc to the value of what the OSH profession does. And I think the kind of post-COVID bounce, if you like, really helped elevate the health element within the health and safety piece. And I think that, you know, as a OSH professional, I know that whilst we were dealing with the health implications of COVID and managing kind of the risk to our people, we also had to do the elements of business as usual in the day job. So it was this really fine balancing act of how you do all of these things. And I think one of the things that people perhaps get a bit scared about when we talk about a new concept is that it means more work. And I think it's really important that we clarify that social sustainability isn't an additional thing that the OSH professional has to do. It's the wrapping and framing of the value of the work that they do to keep people healthy, to keep people safe, and to improve, welfare conditions within the workplace. So I think the framing is really helpful, and I agree with you. I think the bounce doesn't last forever. Now, I know we've spoken to one of the founders of the global sustainability movement, Professor John Elkington, and John coined a famous concept, the triple bottom line. And we asked him to deliver a bit of to kind of go a bit deeper, I suppose, into the definition of social sustainability. And here's what he had to say.
The biblical story of the Tower of Babel was intended as a reminder of how important both language is, and how, as a species and as communities, we don't operate that well when language breaks down. When I came up with the triple bottom line back in 1994, it had economic, social, and environmental components, none of which was terribly well understood at that point in time. Over time, the economic and environmental languages have consolidated, but the social side of things still remains somewhat wobbly. And my sense is that now that the sustainability agenda is mainstreaming, everyone will want their own branding, their own positioning, and their own language. So if we think we've got problems at the moment, it can only get worse over time. So I think it's really important that we agree terms, that we have a standard set of glossaries, if you like. And I think that's one of the big challenges that faces us over the next couple of years. I think IOSH has a key role to play in that. So good luck with it.
So Chris, John Elkington set us a challenge there. Thanks for that, John. And we're defining what social sustainability is. So we're saying social sustainability in the world of work is the impact employers have on people and wider society. And I just wondered whether you might be able to elaborate on that definition and what it really means for businesses.
Yeah, we'll do. I think there's a point that John makes in his video there when he talks about glossaries, plural, glossaries of sustainability, plural. And I support this, that I think that there are sort of multiple definitions, multiple glossaries that come with that sort of sustainability agenda. And he also talks about impact. It's in our definition, impact. I think it's absolutely the right aspect to be focusing on. So what the impacts of our activities are on people. I think that the challenge for the OSH profession for businesses is that for OSH especially, historically, I would argue that they've been more concerned with sort of inputs and output measures, and therefore to think about how that leads to outcomes and impacts might be a little bit unfamiliar. But I think again that framing of sustainability, essentially asking how long our activities and our resource consumption, be that natural resources or physical resources, how long that can be sustained for is really helpful. I would say one thing that businesses absolutely do need to do, given that we're talking a little bit here about language, is be kind of flexible and clever in its use of language. We do have a tendency, I think, to get caught up in the semantics of sustainability, and it can be something of a distraction.
A really important piece there, I think, because I think sometimes, our OSH professionals might look at this and go, right, that's quite a broad definition. It can include the positive, it can include the negative, it could be fairly neutral. Like, what is it that we're measuring, and what's the value of that measurement?
Well, I think that's probably the $1 million question, really. And I mean, we've done work previously. I did a project a little while ago that looked across that broad sustainability landscape, and by which I'm talking about different instruments and different kind of best practice guides and sustainability reporting tools. And there is remarkable alignment in terms of essentially what sustainability or what sustainable business looks like. But in terms of that finer detail, whether it is at the level of definition or whether it's at the level of measurement, there is still a lack of alignment. And I think that's the bit that we are still looking for.
And do you think there's a risk here that big businesses just get hold of this, they use it to kind of, I suppose, further enhance their ability to do business, and our SMEs get left behind?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, I'm just putting my kind of cynical hat on just for a moment. I think that there is still an opportunity or a loophole around sustainability where it can be used for sort of virtue signaling. I mean, I've written down before that you can have sustainability as a set of visions and values. You can have it as a strategic level, but you've also got to think about sustainability at operational level as something that is reportable and those sorts of things. And I do worry that certain businesses, and like you say, it may be the bigger, more well-resourced businesses that are more kind of visible, kind of operate at that kind of shiny visions and value level, and don't necessarily follow it through right the way down the chain.
And do you think social sustainability and this idea of looking at people at the heart of it and businesses' impact on people and then the wider impact on society is an opportunity to, I suppose, cut through some of that complexity?
Yeah, definitely. And I think actually for the OSH profession as well, I think again, in the same way or in the sort of the opposite way, rather than when we say that sustainability offers a really good framing narrative for OSH, I think the same is true in reverse. From an OSH professional point of view, we are in the business of keeping people safe, looking after them. That in itself is something that can be sort of traced up to a strategic level and the level of business value. So I actually think it works both ways. I think it's a really good opportunity for businesses to take hold of this and actually grasp that sense that the OSH is something that is really core to sustainable business. And that's great because it can be in values. It's something that is reportable, albeit we don't know exactly what that looks like in a kind of common sense just yet. But yeah, I think there's a real opportunity there.
I'm going to introduce us to another speaker that we've got some insights from. So we spoke to April Liu, who's the Global Sustainability Director at Li Yi Group, and it's a large footwear manufacturer. And we asked April how social sustainability programs like IOSH for Business are driving change around the world. And she gives some really great insights into the value of diversity of thought and experience in the field of sustainability. So over to April.
To me, sustainability requires keeping multiple balances at present and extend those balances as long as possible. On the journey of social sustainability, it requires me to stay agile, obtaining new knowledges, both in breadth and depth at all times, and constantly calibrate the current status or initiatives from ultimate goals, so I can take actions accordingly when needed. On Catch the Wave, I encounter many professionals from different industries and different fields, with similar or very different background and experiences. Whether it's being a role to share perspectives or a role to participate and learn from the others, or even just as an audience looking at the interactions of Q&A, there are always some points that can trigger new ideas or reflections, which I can apply at work, which I think is very valuable for me on this sustainability journey.
So April's given us some really great insights there, and I suppose one of the questions it leads for me is how do we really leverage the value of diversity of thought and experience and knowledge within sustainability to really drive the social sustainability agenda? And I just wondered whether you've got any thoughts on that, Chris.
Yeah, I think that April raises a couple of really key points here. One of them is around that knowledge development and that need for knowledge development. I don't think anybody knows everything in this space. I talked a moment ago about sustainability, that strategic level, operational level, reporting, measurement, all of those sorts of things. I think best practice guidance is quite limited so far, and therefore that development of knowledge is massively important. In that respect, it makes me think of IOSH's own strategy, and one of those objectives that it has to connect diverse professionals together. I think that's huge here. People are operating in such different environments that knowledge sharing is massively important. And then the second thing that April points to, I think she uses this phrase, constantly calibrating. And I thought, actually, we're talking about that in that sustainability context, but it's kind of part and parcel of what OSH professionals are doing. That kind of, looking across a system, managing change, monitoring, making tweaks and improvements. That's all part of what they already do.
Yeah, and I think that bit about not losing sight of your end objective and that kind of recalibration to make sure you're on track for delivering that end result was that's the bit that really kind of stuck with me. And I think you're right, it's fully transferable across the OSH profession. So Chris, a couple of really great discussion points there, but I think there's a real opportunity to energize the profession in the kind of conversation around OSH and sustainability and this social sustainability piece, to really help people recognize that what they do as an OSH professional is social sustainability. And I wondered if you had any suggestions on how we make that happen.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think the word energize is apt there. That we need momentum, and again, for the second time, I feel like I'm putting my cynical hat on. Other things come along, other priorities take over, and you think of what's happened in the last couple of years. We've talked about that sort of post-COVID moment. You think of things that have come along since then. I would suggest that businesses have, in some way, started to focus on AI now, and technology, and that might have taken some of the attention away from sustainability. So momentum is massive here. I would say that there are many sort of constituents to that sort of OSH community, whether it is OSH professional bodies, whether it is professionals themselves, whether it's policymakers or researchers, that sort of thing. I think each have a part to play in terms of, developing knowledge, continuing to raise awareness, refining standards, developing frameworks, finding that alignment around definitions and things like that. But I would say if I were to boil it down to two really key points, I think that we need stories and we need clear pathways to action. So stories that basically bring this to life for people. We deal in stories. If we can put a human face to these things, I think the same is true of climate change, for example. And we can energize through those stories. It needs to be backed up with those clear pathways to action. So somebody is engaged and then they think, right, well, what can I do next? And I think at the moment, that's where there's perhaps something missing. I don't know whether you'd agree with that.
I do. I'm a massive fan of the narrative arc. I think the fact that you can remember a story from a religious text that's over 2,000 years old, but don't know what your statistical numbers were from 2 years ago, tells a story about how powerful that way of communicating is. And I think also, once you understand that element of it, having some form of roadmap in front of you or understanding somebody else's journey is a really useful way of transferring knowledge. And it's also a really nice segue into the next video, which is Multiplex, who are a business that are doing some of this stuff already. So we spoke to them, and Martin's going to come in and just give us his overview.
Hello, I'm Martin Wilshire, Director of Health, Safety and Wellbeing at Multiplex. I've been asked to talk briefly today by IOSH about how strategic occupational health and safety is influencing how Multiplex does business. So straight away, it puts people at the very top of our agenda. It allows us to focus on a business that people want to work with and want to work for. It then allows us and gives us focus on managing the most critical risks in our organisation, and it allows us to create an agenda of sustainability with our workforce. And that's not just a sustainable business model, but a sustainable industry model where we treat people well. We base our ethos on respect and caring for people and delivering great experiences, so that we can create this people-first culture and deliver measurable and tangible positive impacts in better safety, better quality, better productivity, and create interdependent communities where people want to come to work and be safe every day.
So one of the things that I really enjoyed from Martin there was this idea of co-collaboration, and the fact that the organisation is working with employees to look at how do we make the environment healthy, safe, a place that people really want to come and thrive in terms of it being a work environment. And I just think that that's crucial. And I think, we were just talking about the importance of storytelling. They've got a great story to tell. How, how do we build on that? Or do you have any examples to kind of get to the other point that we were talking about in terms of pathways?
Yeah, I think that Martin's comments are really interesting there. He's talking in those a strategic level, but it's backed up by a sort of a program that runs throughout the whole organization and brings workers along and makes them part of that, makes them part of it. And I think that's a really important aspect. I'd always be keen to suggest that sustainability, social sustainability, however you define it, it can't live in the abstract. It needs to be backed up by things that are actionable. I think there are some really good examples out there, and where I would probably look to that sustainability in the supply chain area as being where there are some really useful examples. Because that's where businesses are not only thinking about getting their own house in order, but they're making that conscious effort to bring along others with them. To your point earlier on about SMEs, and about bringing them on in a way that doesn't stretch them too much and put unrealistic expectations on them. So I might point to something like IKEA's iWay standard. That's where they work with suppliers. They mandate high IOSH standards for those suppliers that cover anything from working conditions, fair wages, ergonomics, and those sorts of things. You look in their literature, they call out those connections with the SDGs. And what I think is really interesting, because it touches on something that IOSH have done before, they talk obviously about SDG 8, which is that provision of decent work, and SDG 3 around health and well-being, but they also call out SDG 12 around responsible consumption and production. So it's looking at that bigger picture and recognizing, in particular with the SDGs, that they're kind of cross-cutting. IKEA, the IKEA example, they talk about a reduction in workplace injuries and improved working conditions across their supply chain. It's touching on up to a kind of 1 million or over 1 million workers. I would say, as a side point, by the way, just on IKEA, that was where I had my first ever paid job. And I still look back on that. I was 18 at the time. Still look back on that and recognize that IKEA as a company have a real small distance between those values that they talk about at a corporate level and then the ability to put them in practice at the operational level. I was working in the warehouse, and so my supervisors and line managers felt, at least in my kind of memory of it, they felt very comfortable executing on those corporate values. So that stays with me now, and I think that there's a kind of there's a broader point to be made there, right? About, again, being able to execute on those sustainable values.
Yeah, and I think the mapping of the sustainable development goals, and where OSH has either like a direct impact or, a kind of secondary impact to them, it's a really important piece of work that IOSH has done. I think it really helps the OSH professional understand their contribution, in the broader sustainability agenda. But I also really like the fact that IKEA are pulling those things out. And I think, we're going to have people listening to this that are leaders in business. We're going to have people that are OSH professionals. We're going to have people that are sustainability professionals. We're going to have people maybe that are on the operational side of things, where this is creeping into their scope of work as well. And I wondered whether you had any kind of key takeaways or action points that they can think on as they, finish up listening to this, and they can kind of leave with a little thing to take away and go, actually, I can go and push some traction against X or Y.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for that OSH audience especially, the first thing I'll say is just be reassured. Be reassured that OSH professionals and OSH functions, what they do as standard, are core components of building sustainable, resilient, inclusive businesses. Every time that they go and assess a risk, every time that they consult with workers on proposed changes, every time they investigate or try and learn from an incident, that's all part of that process. So I would say that, firstly, be reassured that what they're doing is already making a really valuable contribution. The second thing, I think, be curious about what that bigger picture looks like for your organization, what it looks like for your industry, in your supply chains, in your communities, and really try and think about it without, again, to a previous point, without going into the abstract. Try and think about it in a sort of manageable way. What is the context of the work that we are providing? What is our climate that we're operating? How do we compare with other industries? So be curious, but try and keep it in the sort of domain of the realistic without being carried off into the abstract. And I think the final thing that I'd say is we can get lost in the kind of terms and the concepts around sustainability. And I don't think we should ever lose sight of the fact that fundamentally we're in the business of providing safe and healthy work, hopefully meaningful work as well for individuals. So that ability to kind of think globally, but then put things into practice at a local level and understand the relationship between those two is so important.
Yeah, and I really like the bit that you mentioned when you kind of went back a few years to your first job at IKEA, and that idea of reducing the gap between the values on the wall and the actions of the leaders in the organization, I think it's a really lovely point. And I think, if everybody could close that gap, no matter what their role is in an organization, then you'd have, a much richer and I think probably more meaningful work experience for everybody within the organization. So I thought that was a really lovely point. I could talk to you for hours on this topic, and probably not even make a dent in it as well, doing that. But thank you so much for giving us some time today and having a conversation with me on social sustainability. I think it's as I said, a key and critical thing for the OSH profession to get its head around, that social sustainability is what we do, and we can drive some really great engagement through telling some really powerful stories in this space. So, as we're moving from this kind of world of beyond compliance, the future of work, I think depends on us embracing social sustainability. It's not just about meeting regulations, although that is important. It's about leading with integrity, ensuring the well-being of our people and creating a positive impact on society. And occupational safety and health, I think, are at the core of this journey. We've got the ability to create environments where both people and businesses can thrive. And I think to lead and manage sustainably, it's essential to equip yourself with the right knowledge and tools. Now at IOSH, we do offer some comprehensive courses like Leading Sustainably, and we've also do business assurance certification, and that can empower you to drive meaningful change within your organisation. So I would ask you to join us in shaping a future where sustainability isn't just a goal, it's the standard. To take the next step today with IOSH and be the leader your organisation needs for a sustainable tomorrow. Thank you very much for listening. Chris, thank you for your time. Thanks for all those people who shared their experience and journey with us in the video.